Hello, hello, everyone. I was actually just checking. Are we live, Andreas?
Yes, we are live.
I always get nervous, Cristobal, with these LinkedIn lives because sometimes they go to the right place, sometimes they don't. How are you, Cristobal? How's everything?
Oh, good. Oh, good. I'm happy to see that finally Andreas is getting actually branded merchandise. Yeah, no, I see it. It's first time. So it's good.
We're getting there. We're getting there. We're learning from some of the best, namely a guy called Cristobal Alonso from a firm. I don't know if you've heard them, Startup Wise Guys, because they're always really well branded.
Not doing too well today. I was thinking like I'm missing my banner behind it, and we just made a banner for Bilbao, and we have one about in the office in Malaga. That's okay. I will survive just with red today.
Yeah. Cristobal, today is a special episode here at the European VCs for a bunch of reasons. I think reason number one is that we're also doing it live on LinkedIn, which we normally don't do. So that's exciting. Let's see how people receive it and if they like it or not. The second reason is because, or the second big reason is because this is a first-time format. It's called the Startup Memo. And the reason we're doing that is because, as our audience knows, is we're doing a syndicate in the Startup Wise Guys. We're super happy and excited about it. But also because, Cristobal, you have a bit of a reputation of getting people around you excited. And so we thought it would be a really cool way to show the power of this, the accelerator-based VC model that Startup Wise Guys has. The coolest way to do it would be to have you talk about a deal that you guys did and that excites you and why you did it, and et cetera, et cetera. Thus the Startup Memo style. Before we start, Cristobal, I'd love to ask you one thing. Most of our listeners and audience are GPs and LPs, or at least aspiring LPs in some way, and that's why they did the syndicates with us. Why the hell do you think they should care about what we're going to talk now, and what's your take on the value they can extract from hearing us chat for the next 30, 40 minutes?
I think is helping understand the trade-off between risk reward of basically very early stage investment, of being the first believer, as we said. There is a perception in the market about risk and the comparison between Series A, seed, pre-seed funds, or accelerator funds. I think that's the best value, and obviously how that draws part of the passion and the connection that we have with founders. That I think is very different when you invest much later and you're just one of those investors joining. I think the connection that we draw with the founders and the journey, it becomes much bigger. I almost see this is like Jerry Maguire, in the picture for the $7 million deal. He's on the right side, but on the first pitch, he said, "I want to be the guy there," right? So we are the Jerry Maguire. We're part of the picture, but if you only at the end, you're going to be in the corner. So most newspapers would cut you, right? You're not important anymore, right? But I think that connection that we build with the player, with Jerry, right? I think that's part of the story also that probably is interesting to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cristobal, before we dive into the startup that we're going to look at, which is of course Fractory, I'll ask you to just give us the real quick pitch on Fractory. What is Fractory, and why are they amazing? And why did you say if we're going to talk about one of our 300 startups, we're going to talk about Fractory?
I would say, well, I'll tell you first what they do and I'll tell you why it's exciting. But basically, Fractory is putting together the Industry 4.0. So how can we, using a peer-to-peer or sharing connectivity, make industry manufacturing more efficient? So in a way, they are sharing what machines can do in one part of the world with the needs of other people in another part of the world, and using excess capacity to basically make this happen, right? When they started with us, it was just about metal cutting or laser cutting machinery sharing. Now the model has expanded, but I think that's what it is. Why we were excited? It was a very young team with no idea about industry, revolutionizing industry, right? And I will tell you a bit more afterwards. But I think it was the power of the team. It was three guys just out of university, and not even Tallinn from Tartu, wanted to revolutionize this one, and we saw power of a very interesting team capable of making things happen. Then the rest is history, and we can talk about it more in details, right? And I think obviously this Estonian connection, and if today you see these top 10 companies that might be the next unicorn in Estonia, they're always one of them, right? But I think it's obviously the Estonian connection for us is always, I think, part of being proud of our heritage and being proud of our founders and having good Estonian, being from Estonia initially is always a good and powerful story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and what you just touched on is actually where I want us to start, because I want us to start with your first meeting with Martin, Josep, and Ryan. That's the founding team of Fractory, and I just want to hear, what is it about them that got you so excited?
First, remember, this is 5 years ago, almost, yeah, 5 years ago. So first, all the boot camps were physical, right? So you probably
Yeah.
everything was very different from today in a way. So in fact, the whole application process mostly happened online, and you start ranking, debating, etc. Then you get the 25 that you like the most, and then you bring them for 3 days, right, together, because you wanted to see them, right? So you do like today, we still do all these 25 minutes meetings, but they were physical. But then you took them for drinks, so for you wanted to discover the personal side of the companies, right? So in this case, they all came to Riga, right? And I think what excited us, I tell you a bit of a story because actually Herty comes from that sector, right? From manufacturing. That's his background. And he said, these guys don't understand shit about industry. They don't understand anything about what they're talking, but they're clearly smart and they clearly can click things, right? So there was no belief in the way they were portraying how they will run the business then that they have any future. But we thought that the sector they were attacking needed a revolution, was prompt to change, and that coming with a completely almost naive, fresh energy into that sector, they could actually find angles to disrupt it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think was that, and again, when the one thing that I did like it was the complement between the three founders, right? So, and it's even on my book also because I put them as an example, and it's a funny, but because one was clearly the CTO, basically then we have the sales guy, and then Marty says, and then it was me. So somebody has to run the company, right? So I guess I'm the CEO, right? And then I
That's
think
but
obviously he earned
that's
the stripes,
yeah.
but
And I was about to say that that's a perfect quality of the CEO, right? He says, "Okay, you're best at that, you're best at that. Now I'll deal with the rest of the shit that is going to
exactly.
come up."
But usually, in fact, the CEOs are the sales. The CEOs do the sales at the beginning, so it's usually not
Of
normal
course.
that you find in the first founding team a sales dedicated. You always find the CTO and the CEO, but usually the other guys usually master the marketing or maybe sometimes even more product. But this was very clear. There was the sales guy, and then Martin doing everything else. And I think that has played a good role on how he has evolved as a CEO, because I think from the beginning he was also into people, into how do we scale the people side, the recruiting, the scouting, because he was doing a tiny bit less of the sales, and he was also very aware about how do we scale this on the back end, right? So and observing the issues when first going to the UK and recruiting and failing on the first team they put there. So I think that got there. But again, to me, it did excite me. There was a very good skills balance between them. And that was a very interesting thing that we could work with for 4 months. Good market to be disrupted and zero industry knowledge. So basically means no assumptions. Everything could be questionable, hypothesized, and tested, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd
It's
love to dive
interesting
into.
because Cristobal, what you said, it's kind of your perspective on it at least is a byproduct of the model you have, because other models would say, well, if we think it's an exciting market, let's find the best team. And you're kind of saying, well, we actually had a bunch of super smart people here. We have a market that is big, we like it, we're excited, blah, 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 and they have no assumptions. That's beautiful. But that's only because of your model. And so I'd like to ask you two questions in one, which is, this was 5 years ago. Could you give us a quick overview? Okay, what has happened in the last 5 years? And also, what was your role as an investor, but also Startup Wise Guys as a whole in that journey? And just so we understand that better.
We said, we can make chocolate. We can make shit look like chocolate, but not taste like chocolate, right? So the first part is that you need to get the best founders. So the accelerator is amazing, but if you have a bad founder, doesn't matter. You're not going to transform him, right, or her.
Yeah.
But if you have a good founder, then you can transform them into a better founder, right? And that was part of the work we did with them during 5 months. They even were decent for Estonian standards pitching already at the beginning. It was about how do we build a company? How do we work with them to build a company? I even thought they're going to get some traction, but can they build a company? And from the beginning, their model was based in cross country combinations, right? Because you need to get guys ordering in UK and taking it from Estonia and moving it. So the back end of the company per se need to be thought through
Yeah.
from the beginning. Even if at the beginning everything was manual, but how do you get to that being automated, to that being scalable? So I think that was the a lot of the thoughts. I think many times in the accelerators companies, we work also on scalability of sales, which we did a lead, but that becomes the main focus. I think with Fractory was about finding this business model that over time it could be scale, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward when they are 5 months after the accelerator, oh sorry, 5 months when we finish the acceleration. Again, very good pitch, very good team, a bit of traction. So I would say the first round was easy. We just kind of advising them, guys, let's aim at this valuation, let's look together at the deal, careful with the term sheet here, blah blah blah. But there was enough excitement in Estonia with the young team to come there. There is this famous S-band syndicate, which kind of looks for the best company, two of them every year. So they were a prime target for that, right? So
Yeah.
we knew that was going to happen. So we just helped
Right.
them, advised them, but that was okay. I think the problem
Yeah.
started afterwards, right? And I think it's about their main focus was how to enter the UK. And I think we had a role there, mostly about being able to answer Martin calls. Because somebody said this is not working, or I don't know how I feel about this guy, or I maybe we're doing something wrong here. So being that sounding board in that process of the first internationalization was, I think, the key role that we have, which allow, I think, then to, when that was right, to get the next round, right? Which was basically the seed, in which, again, they were doing well. So they were doing themselves. And then I would say the other pivotal moment has been in Series A. And this has been interesting because there was interest. Martin did a good job. The company has a very good growth. They have had a couple of times in which the growth has slowed down for 2 to 3 months, and they were
Yeah.
very smart at going in about why this happens, right? So I almost don't know any company that is MRR growth 48 months, right? They always do the good ones, they grow for 12 months, they find a plateau, they figure out what is going on, they come back stronger, it happens again, it happens 2 or 3 times. And that has happened to them, and they have used every crisis to basically come up stronger by making changes on the back end and on the talent side. But in the Series A, the key thing was there was a number of people that wanted a piece of the action. And a couple of them are VCs that are very close to us. And at some point, Martin played hardball, and one of the VCs got out of the deal because he was being fair. I said, guys, this is what
Yeah.
I want. And the,
Yeah.
the, the, the VC thought, I'm going to get a better deal. And he walked away. And then we were meeting, everybody was calling us. Martin, the VCs, can you help us? Can you intermediate? I know you're a good friend. We want to be in the deal. How do we do it? So I think we were a good person there. Again, we're always looking for the founder, and everybody knows for the founder well-being, let's say,
Yeah.
but also helping. Hey, how do we do this so we are fair, so you don't break the relationship with VCs for the future, even if you say no. And at the end of the day, in fact, everybody came in, but at the conditions that Martin thought were fair. So I think that was a very good outcome there. And I think
Yeah.
we had a role on that one. And maybe the last one has been Martin has hired actually extremely good found apart from the founders management team. He has added a CFO, top quality, head of HR, and he's been having these discussions with him about, okay, so what are you not doing now? And he told me, man, dude, I was doing HR. When I hired this woman, wow, this is it's a new ball game. I was doing so many things wrong, right? When he hires the CFO, said this guy is amazing, right? Like the amount of information and data that I get. So I think it's helping shaping this management team when you grow, and thinking that the founders think even if they stay on the roles, they can learn, and they have hired people with 10, 15 more years than them, and they are a very powerful combination of those two, right? So being sounding board on some of the initial mistakes, being there for the founder, helping when the rounds get in, either with the intros or within the round management, being there to how do we actually, and sometimes even intermediating to a certain degree. And then in the evolution of the organization, having being somebody who understands this and forcing Martin to ask himself questions has been also important, right? And obviously, always giving them a good word out, right? So for us, they have always been one of our teams that we always love. And he's an amazing role model in the community. I don't know if he was with the Prime Minister of Estonia, in fact, 2 weeks ago, interviewing her in the stage, right? So he is now the role model in Tartu about how you don't need to leave a middle town regional in a place in Eastern Europe to become a unicorn. You can do it from here as long as you have an international mindset. And
Yeah.
that has been actually an amazing thing to see, right?
Yeah. Maybe, Cristobal, you could just finish the story with now they've raised the Series A. And could you, I know that it gave you 120x so far, but the size of it, where you're seeing them heading, that kind of thing, could you just wrap up the story there? Because then we can get back to first
Yeah, the
meeting.
story is they should be a unicorn, and a unicorn based on revenues, by the way. So I think it's not a unicorn just I have seen the growth. They just did a monster GMB and margin. So a lot of the work has been actually working on margins, which I think that's the smart thing to do. It's not just
Mhm.
about growth on the top line. It's about do you have margins to sustain. We're working in industry. You're working almost in a marketplace level, right? And that's what they have been doing, right? But I see them there are two rounds for unicorn. I think they can be unicorn in Series C.
Yeah,
It's not the objective, but we love to. If you put your hand in the fire, said if I have to put the hand on the fire for my first unicorn, that's one of the top three that I would love them to be, right? Because to me, it represents all the things well done. Sustainable company, good founders, creating a company with values, growing steadily, doing it the right way. And young guys from a regional city, not even Tallinn, right? To
yeah,
me,
Yeah.
it's all about if I want to tell a story, this is the guys, right? So I see them heading in that direction.
yeah,
I don't think they will be acquired before because I see them with a lot of energy, with a very good management team. They don't want the unicorn; they want to grow this company. If they do well,
yeah,
it's going to become a unicorn.
yeah,
That's why I
Yeah.
see it heading. And again, remember the guys are still on their. They're not most of them. They're not even 30,
yeah.
right? They're
Ah,
having
that's
the first
amazing.
kid. They're having the first kid right now. Martin is expecting his first kid, right? Yeah, so I think that there is a lot of room and energy still left on them. And in a way, they're only operating between US, UK, a bit of Scandinavia, and Estonia. And in the US, it's just first steps, right? So there's still a lot of room to grow in the
Yeah,
company.
Yeah.
So well executed, that takes them to unicorn in the next 18 to 24 months. Stays longer, who cares? But that's the thing where they're heading.
yeah.
Yeah.
Before David takes us into the market, I would just love to hear a bit more about the very early days, and also because now it's post factual, right? All the things you saw back then, do you see that they have come to fruition? And also, what did you not see? What did because you have this process of doing a 3 day super intense boot camp with them, where you then after that need to form your own opinion. Is this going to work? I'd love to hear thinking about thinking about that in terms of this company.
Let's not be presumptuous, but let's see how I say this without sounding stupidly arrogant. I have no doubts there will be I have no doubt about them. I didn't know, of course, if they're going to become a 100 million unicorn company, right? But I had no doubt they will walk the talk to Series A to certain degrees. If you look at the steps, right? They had all the components to do it. What I didn't see, how amazing of a CEO Martin has become because of his age, because of his background. I thought he was going to be a good CEO. I could even see him stepping into different management role at some point. He was terrible at pitching. In fact, two co-founders are even better. Actually, one of the best CTO pitching was always his founder. He was, he has this Estonian, it's like, right? But he has become a great storyteller also. maybe not the most charismatic guy still when pitching, but a very good storyteller, right? And I think that's a great quality. But again, I didn't see to the extent that it has become such an amazing CEO and leader of the organization, right? And that to me, that is great, right?
I want to take us back to what I would call one of the fundamentals, right? Which is the market. As you were saying, Cristobal, you guys got excited about it. The space was super interesting to you. Take us through that process. How did you look at this market? How would you define this market? And why did you think it was exciting 5 years back? And of course, it's an unfair question because you've seen it develop, but we'd love to understand your thinking.
There is no unfair questions, I would say, in life about why we born and why we're going to die, right? And you don't have an answer to those, so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Um, I think we saw very little innovation still on the market, right? This is metal cutting, so heavy manufacturing, very local because of the nature of the size of the machinery, of the components of the materials. So when analyzing the market, we saw a market that was 20 years behind other industries, right? Also, we have seen a lot of the sharing economy, how it has been impacting other. Let's talk about even taxis, right? Which even nobody expected anything like that. But so we have seen already remember Taxify, now Bolt was nobody wanted to invest on them, right? And it came out of Estonia, but that was 5 years before. So I think we have seen that there was a sharing economy play to be very innovative market coming on, right? And clearly the pain point, which was excess capacity in large manufacturing not being accessible to small players, right? Specifically just because of lack of info and lack of transparency, not because they were hiding, but there was nowhere to find it, right? So that allow us to say there's clearly a market. The question is, what's the business model to attack it, right? And I think the second part you said is like, hey, it's metal, it's cutting, you know, it's never going to stop. There's going to be housing all the time. There's going to be elevators all the time, So I think we saw that coming. And then when we saw competition, that's the second part you want to analyze in the market, right? There was nothing there really. There was nothing big yet, right? So you might have another small guys trying to do things, but there was nothing emerging, not even a role model in the US yet, right? So some people say, well, that means there is no market. That which is sometimes true, that it might be too early. But I don't think we're afraid that it was too early. It was the right time, and it will take time, and it has taken 5 years to get there, right? So,
Yeah.
and there was an entry point into the US and the UK. We were looking also at Germany at that time. We saw that some of the largest markets, there was an entry point. It was possible to enter them from foreign country, which in other places is not possible. In other industries is not possible. This was possible because the business model they had in mind, right? So that made us believe, market makes sense, right?
Yeah. UK has ended up being a very big market for them and bigger than Estonia where they started. Why do you think that is, and what learnings have you drawn from it?
UK is a very industrial country, right? And at the end of the day, because with a way less language barriers that you will find, for example, you want to penetrate Italian market, which could say is another very heavy industry, right?
Mhm.
So I think Germany and UK were the two prime candidates, and Germany had a lot of the same barriers that you find in Italy, right? I might say that initially they were mostly prospecting the Scandinavian as the first step because of the price arbitrage of price difference if you manufacture from Estonia. They did have some ways to implement things in Estonia. So they tested basically with the Nordics, I would say, the model. But then very quickly it was clear that the demand was in the different industries in the UK and that the price difference will be there for the long term. So it was more about how do you enter the market, right? And for them, the key thing was getting the right people. And as I said, the first team iteration was disastrous. Like, nothing worked. They basically replaced the first full team fully. But it was not very expensive learning. They were smart at not putting all the bets into three guys very expensive. They did it well. So there was a space to make a mistake. And that's one of the things we work a lot with the teams. Is like, when you go into new markets, allow yourself to test it and fail. Not that if it fails, you're out of the game, right? And that
Yeah.
has to be by the way you hire, or by the way you partner, or by the way you do the agreements, or by the way you yourself go there. You know, but again, I think the good thing in the UK, every market is local. At the end, you need local connections, right? But it's one of the markets that foreigners can come in, speak the language, and do business, right? And I think that's a good thing about the market. That I think is the only European market, maybe the Netherlands, but it's small enough, right? That has that capability. In any other market in Europe, you need the local connection. You hire it, you buy it, whatever. In the UK, you can do a lot of experiments yourself or understanding language helps. Again, you travel there, you spend time there. So I think and I think the good thing also there is it was not London, right? It was not going to London. It was going to the
Yeah.
UK, and there is not that much attention to Newcastle, Manchester. There's much less going on there, so you can actually find amazing talent there. If you go to
Yeah.
London, you probably lose your shirt if you get it wrong. If you go to Manchester, you go to Newcastle or any other city there, I think the possibility, and because it was industry, that was the direction, right? I think
Yeah.
that was a very helping point. Let's say I love unsexy industries. I just love them,
Yeah.
right? The construction, metal. I love it. It's not about PR. It's not about sexy. It's about building businesses. And in people in these industries, they if you have a good proposition, they're going to test it because it's way less of the sexiness of what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I also want to take another development in the story of Fractory, sorry, which is 2020, COVID year, right? That was a great year for them, actually. If you have the numbers top of mind and you can share, I'd love to hear them, but also your understanding to what made them robust at that time that for some other startups was a really tough time, and what were the factors that made that possible for them.
If you think about in the industry, the main impact has been humongous cost, right? So the fact that when COVID started, the Chinese market closed, that the manufacturing suddenly there was no materials coming, that every price was going up two, three, four times. Suddenly, everybody in this industry said, "Is there another way?" Right? So in fact, they have a model in which they could use excess capacity, excess materials, send me the cut online, I print it here and send it to you. I do it within the EU. We can use local capacity. So I think that part they were in the right place, right? And I think
Yeah,
they have been around for long enough to be solid enough to manage that, right? If it would have happened maybe a year and a half before, it will be too early to take advantage of that fully, right? I think the
yeah,
second thing is, as I said, they were in the second team iteration, so they had the right people in place to understand how to do it. So I think they were in the right place in the right moment, and they were ready, right? And I think
yeah,
everything that happened around COVID forced all the industries to take the next step towards digitalization, and they were a clear candidate to do this properly, right? If you look at the Series S21, right? So in fact, this was 20 was the one that put the numbers in the right place, right?
yeah, yeah,
And almost made what there was to happen. And there has been no turning back, meaning the industry, some other industries have tried to go back to old ways, right? I think the industry has not changed. The industry said we need to do
yeah,
more of this. If you look at Construtech or Contech, depending how people is
yeah,
calling it, there is
yeah,
more and more coming. We haven't even. I think we are in Construtech 1.5, right, max. There is still a lot of development coming up. So I think we're just going to
yeah,
see more and more. And one of the things in Factory is see a lot of people reaching out to them to do collaborations. So I think they have become also a hub to do things, right? And that's a very interesting play for them going
yeah,
forward. Right? They're in 10 sub verticals, I think, right now. If you look at all the things, laser cutting, plasma, flame cutting, water jet, tubos, machining. So there's so many sub verticals within this area that they can help and put collaborations going forward, right?
yeah. And I think that connects beautifully to a natural follow-up question to the one I asked, which would be the sustainability of it, right? Because we've seen many startups grow or have success. A lot could be said about what that means, but let's not go into that rabbit hole. During COVID, that was not sustainable, right? And in this specific case, we're talking about growth from core fundamentals of getting new clients, getting new business. So that's one thing, of course. But I'd love to ask you, Why do you think this is now sustainable and we'll keep on seeing this growth post-COVID as well as we're now entering that era?
First, by the way, they were never portraying themselves as a sustainability company, but in fact they are saving CO2, right? So in fact they are even
I wasn't talking
sustainable.
about that
I know,
sustainability, but yeah,
I
we
know.
can talk about it. Yeah, of
You
course, of
throw it
course.
there as I said, hey, I can market that even a bit there, right?
You have to put it.
So
Yeah,
yeah. So I think and that was not, they have never been their marketing point,
yeah,
but in fact they have been able to prove this over time, right? I think they were sustainable because I think, as I said, they have made the mistakes on the team hires previously, and I think they have the team and the maturity to help them grow through this, right? They actually, the CFO and the CHRO, they were hired in the second wave of COVID, right? So basically the second summer, 21.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So I think right before, in fact, they almost got the people lined up before Series A, and once they had the funding to get that A team, they put it in place, right? So I think again, their mentality. They were constantly thinking how to do this in a sustainable manner. They were constantly thinking, who are we missing in the team? And the fact that they have made mistakes on the hiring process early on, I think have put them very much about how to do this right. And I think, uh, and then maybe the last one is the margins, right? So, and we had a very painful story on an amazing startup that was probably, I would say, was competing with Fractory on being the start in the portfolio, and suddenly they just have to close their business. And I think the key part was there that in both cases they were looking at GMB, let's say, but for Martin and the team, they were looking at the margins all constantly as a key variable of their growth, right? And I think there is too many people building businesses on growth, but focusing sometimes on the brown KPIs, and that's what the investors should prove their value, right? Investors should say, and I ran a marketplace in the past. I said, why are you focusing on number of goods sold? Why don't you focus on the number of trading happening in your
yeah.
marketplace, or how fast when you put a good is being sold, right? So, and I think sometimes they're looking at growth wrongly. I think Fractory was looking at GMB growth for sure, but I was analyzing this on the margin level. And I
Yeah.
think this was actually similarly relevant, and that was always part of the search. And when entering new countries, when looking at by the way, they're now in Italy again, finally, but because it was always an industry that makes sense, but they came in the right moment. So I think they explored the countries on the right moment. It was not for them, let's just say we are in 20 countries, is let's be in one country properly. And once they got the UK properly, then they started experimenting with the US. Now they got to Italy. There's too many people worrying about being in 10 countries and putting that as part of the deck instead of being in a country very well. I always tell my startups, why do you want to go there? Why don't, if you're having momentum here, build the momentum, become a dominant player in your market if it's big enough, right? And then go to the next one instead of start putting resources in different places because you're too fragile, up to Series A, even sometimes in Series A. You're too fragile on
especially
your resourcing.
especially in Europe where you have borders that you have to cross every single time. It's not like in the states where you go from one state to another, and then that it's roughly the same legal frameworks, it's the same language, all that. Here it's a very different experience every single time. So oftentimes, right, build until you get to the stage where you can then acquire the distribution network or whatever you need in the other country. So Cristobal, you just gave us a bunch of numbers and metrics like stats, and I'd love to just dive a bit more into that and say, when you made the decision in the beginning, you obviously had no traction, but to look at, I'd love to hear both very early stage. How did you look at traction with Factory
Yeah.
and all your general startups, right? Because then it's about how, and then after it's also how did traction then develop for this case, and when did you start feeling very comfortable that they would develop in the right direction?
Yeah. Things have changed a little bit, right? So we're taking more and more teams in which we already see 5, 6K, even 10K MRR, right? So when you have those kind of numbers, I think you can go a bit deeper into how those numbers happen. So how many people, what is the pricing, is there any churn, is there any usage? So I think even if it's very early stage, if they come with some level of revenues, I think I think that helps, right? When there is nothing, I think you're just having a team bet. So all you're going deeper is in the team bet, and then having somebody that knows the industry, yourself, or reaching out to people that tells, does this make sense, right? And if it makes sense, even not in the way they're doing it, but it makes sense, and you have a very good team, you're going to have time to make it happen. So I think then when you grow the accelerator, it's about we set in MRR with trust, and we always said you have to do 4x of your MRR within 6 to 9 months. That's always kind of the main objective, right? It is, my next objective is the seed round. I said, no, the seed round is what you do when you have traction and what you do to enable traction. It's not the objective, right? The objective has to be commercial. But then, of course, every team is different. Sometimes they need MRR, customers is different models, but it's a 4x growth that we're looking from a year. And I try to tell people in a SaaS business with 30% month over month growth for 6 months, you don't need to look for funding. Funding comes to you. If you have 20%, most people will go and say, let's do it, but let's look at it. And if you have 10 to 20, you might get curiosity. And below that, forget it. You're just doing it wrong, right? So I think, and the question is growth over what, right? So sometimes it's MRR. If it's a GM business, you have to look at also the margin, and you need to look at the scalability. The second thing that we work a lot with them to say, are you in the next round, is when they're able to enable sales that are not warm leads. So if you look at everybody at the beginning, of course, they get, I have 3 sales. Yeah, your uncle, your ex-employer, and your co-founder wife. Okay, good. It's good. You still sold to them, and it's good. But it's when we can generate a model that it can create business out of cold leads, right? Automated, LinkedIn, digital marketing, whatever it is, right? And that takes time. So we try to understand, okay, so how do we break that into so are you building the pipeline properly? Are we measuring the pipeline building? Do we know the time between the steps? Do we know the key processes? So when something takes too long, you start experimenting, right? So I think more than a variable, a KPI in itself, is how the pipeline works, right? I would say that one. Of course, everybody's going to ask you again. David said, "Is the market big enough? You have differentiation." Of course, that's the basics, right? And we work on making it as crispy as possible, right? But it's going to be still in pre-seed, for sure, and sometimes in seed business model questions, pricing model questions. There's a lot to do, but to me, it's like, can you create a business and develop a pipeline that you can scale? And to me, that's the word that we need to work on them. And then the last one is, are you guys ready? Is this a team that is ready to take it to the next level? Is this a team that is discussing properly, that have governance, that understands the way, who hires people, who looks at values, who can attract talent? And that you see it. When you work with them, you see it, and you force it. And I think we're having more and more an effect on that part of the business because we're working a lot this business founder transformation. And I think that because that you can carry longer, they still need that in seed level, in pre-seed level, and you can still advise them at that level on these things, right?
Yeah. I have one final question before we go to the quick fire, and that is for you because you've teased it a couple of times, Cristobal. They didn't have any assumptions about the market. They came with a completely fresh mind. Now they've actually built it. They figured out how they would target the opportunity that got you all hyped in the beginning. So my question would be, what has turned out to be the superior part of the model in Fractory? What is it that allows them to beat out the competition?
Capacity to serve sub verticals within manufacturing. So remember, they started in laser cutting. That was the vertical, right? Right now they're serving 13, 14. So they figured out which part of the industrial processes, when you move across different sub verticals, are actually repetitive and can be automated and served by a third party, which is them, which is the cut file sharing, transported, printed down, right? So I think they have figured out that across many different sub verticals, which allows them to have a much bigger market, right? And by the way, it's cross border always, because it's still very big players with set capacity. So I think so instead of being very much only Mastercard and doing that very well, I think they have managed to understand the industrial value chain process and basically focus in one part that is basically cross verticals in a way, right? I think that's the one thing they have done superiorly and margin management. They're really good at looking at margin to understand where, which is the same thing. If you're in the right part of the value chain and you're doing the right thing, you understand the margin, understand what you have to do more of, what you have to automate, what you have to let others do, right? And I think they're being very good at keep analyzing those numbers. Is I would say Fractory's top 5 reporting in the 300 companies we have from day one. The quality of the reporting of number, it was not just in USA. They were doing top quality, and these people like reporting is not an obligation to the investors. Reporting is the way you understand the business, and so into your investors and everybody else, you understand it. And Martin and the team got it right from day one. They spent time and invest time on doing this well. So it was great stakeholder management, but great business knowledge, and they exposed these challenges. When there was a margin issue, said we have a challenge. When they have an issue with the resources, said we have a challenge. They never hide their weaknesses or challenges, and that created a very trustworthy relationship with all the stakeholders across the value chain.
There's two really cool insights in what you said, right? It's so simple that we often forget it, right? We learn it in business school. Everyone learns it in business school. You need to measure to manage. You need to measure to manage. And reporting is just showing what you're measuring and managing. It's nothing else, right? So it's not about reporting. It's about everything that's before, and that's why it's important. I love that, and the trust point being beautiful. Cristobal, you've done a couple of episodes with us already, so you know how we ended. Quick fire round. This will be more focused on Startup Wise Guys than Fractory because it's what we love to do to end the episodes. Are you ready for it?
Always.
Always, the third time. Cristobal, why the hell does the world need Startup Wise Guys?
We have to keep innovating and disrupting industries, and you can only do that when somebody is the first believer in early stage founders that have nothing but a team and a dream, and supporting them on diminishing their mistakes or the impact of their mistakes.
Beautiful. Second question of the quick fire round, Cristobal. What will Startup Wise Guys look like in 10 years or so?
They're top 3 investor in number of deals in the world, and number 1 if we exclude the US. Creating hopefully by them 10 years 50,000 employment, net creation employment through our founders, which is the impact on, but obviously employment of high quality. Supporting a network of no less than 10-15,000 founders hopefully by then.
Yeah. And that also replies the first question, right? The job creation is amazing. The potential there is amazing. Third and final question, and this is obviously particularly interesting to us and the syndicate and everyone that is interested in being part of investing into Startup Wise Guys. Why should LPs or investors pick Startup Wise Guys?
Because early stage investment is the best trade-off of risk reward in the industry. We have multipliers by exiting just properly on Series A. And we have the scale that 80% of our companies survive, 50% of them keep going, which means that in every single fund there is at least 50 companies that can give you the returns. So if you do the math, so apart from everybody else, which is impacting, fun, interesting, and intelligent to do so, but I think it's just the risk reward is actually not understood well, and it's the best in the industry.
I would maybe add that for any investor that's also looking to access early stage deals across the globe, you guys are super interesting.
Yeah, the diversification,
amount of deals
right?
you're doing.
The diversification. We have 60 founders, so I think if you want to look at, you control your own country very well, even your region, but what do I do everything else? We are going to give you the winners, or 1/3 of the winners in average of every other region in CIS, Africa, that you have not way to get there. We're going to cultivate it, educate it, prepare it, and then ready for you to invest in the next rounds.
Yeah, and if I should add to that, I'd say that this is why we are particularly in love with Startup Wise Guys, is that you're also used to servicing a big LP base that are interested in co-investing with you. So it's not just an afterthought or something whenever you need capital for a deal, then you shoot it out, but it's an integral part of your model, which I believe is why it's going to be so exciting when we do this syndicate.
Fully agree. It's about creating a powerful ecosystem in which everybody gives back in the different ways. Co-investing, mentoring. So you have so many funders, so many LPs, etc. All that power of the network. This should be the most powerful startup network outside of the US in the world, right? I
Yeah,
think that serves its own purpose at the end of the day
yeah,
to help growth and success apart from impact.
absolutely. Awesome, Cristobal. That was it for today. We're so thankful for your time and for your insights here on how you picked and helped scale Fractory. Thanks so much.
Thanks to Fractory, we just helped on the right. They did the work.